Chapter 1. Social Anxiety. The shy bladder social anxiety disorder can seriously affect every part of a person's life. Without treatment, it often becomes a lifelong condition that rarely improves on its own. People with social anxiety disorder are also more likely to develop mood disorders such as depression or bipolar disorder. They are also at a much higher risk of experiencing suicidal thoughts. Almost everyone has felt shy at some point. Can you remember the last time you did? Let's start with something that happened during a baseball game. Coach Anderson sat in the dugout, every muscle in his face tight with tension. His eyes never left Ryan, the all-star infielder. Ryan cleanly fielded a routine ground ball. Then he stood up and threw to his teammate Jake at first base, only about 40 feet away. The ball sailed far over Jake's head. It was an unbelievable mistake. Even amateur players rarely make an error that bad. But Coach Anderson wasn't surprised. He'd seen Ryan do it again, and again. Damn it, he froze again. Now let's jump to a concert. Tonight's headliner was the famous singer Carly Simon. Months of preparation had led to this moment. The curtain rose. The audience waited. They kept waiting. Still no one came on stage. People began to boo. Backstage, Carly was curled up in tears while confused crew members stared at her. What happened? She had believed she could perform. But from the very first day she started preparing for the concert, one terrifying thought had never left her mind. Now it had become reality. She was so terrified of performing that she couldn't even walk onto the stage. Looking at these two people, your own moments of shyness probably don't seem like much anymore. A professional athlete suddenly can't make a simple throw. A world-famous performer can't step onto a stage. That doesn't sound like ordinary shyness. So what's really happening? Let's look at a few more examples. Some women refuse to go shopping alone. The moment they step outside, they feel like everyone is watching them. Every glance feels like judgment. They become tense, uncomfortable, and overwhelmed with anxiety. Some men have a different problem. They can't urinate in a public restroom if someone is standing nearby. They have to wait until everyone leaves, or they hide inside a private stall. Otherwise, nothing happens. Psychologists even have a name for it. The shy bladder. What do all of these situations have in common? Each person has to do something while other people are watching. Whether it's speaking, performing, shopping, or simply using the restroom, they feel as if they're being judged. And that pressure becomes overwhelming. When they're alone, none of these activities are difficult. The problem only appears when other people are around. That's social anxiety disorder. The most common fears include speaking in public, having even simple conversations, going on dates, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, writing while someone is watching, and many other everyday situations. Studies suggest that as many as 13.3% of people will experience some level of social anxiety disorder during their lifetime. That makes it one of the most common mental health conditions in the world. It is seen more often among people with lower levels of education, those who are single, and those with lower incomes. Men and women are affected at roughly the same rate. By now, the difference between ordinary shyness and social anxiety disorder should be obvious. Feeling a little embarrassed once in a while is completely normal. Living in fear of being watched is something entirely different. Chapter 2. Where social anxiety begins. Now let's look at a real case. There was a boy named Ethan who grew up in a small town. When he was 15, the first signs of social anxiety disorder appeared. He stopped interacting with other teenagers completely. It took Ethan nearly 7 years just to finish college. The biggest reason? He refused to take exams, especially oral presentations. He eventually graduated with an engineering degree and landed a job as an engineer. He lasted only 6 months. After quitting, he completely withdrew from society. Other than his own family, he avoided almost everyone. Whether he had to speak in public or simply meet someone in a position of authority, the symptoms hit immediately. His face turned bright red. His hands shook. He broke into a sweat. His mouth went dry. His heart pounded like crazy. By the age of 28, Ethan had become completely isolated. He barely left home anymore. Cases like this show that social anxiety disorder is much more than simply being bad with people. It can destroy careers, relationships, and everyday life. Without treatment, it often becomes a lifelong condition with little chance of improving on its own. People with social anxiety disorder are also much more likely to develop depression or bipolar disorder. Many also struggle with suicidal thoughts. Only the people living through it truly understand how painful it can be. So where does social anxiety come from? To answer that, we have to go all the way back to human evolution. Thousands of years ago, humans survived by hunting. Every day meant facing dangerous animals and life-threatening situations. Over time, our brains learned to fear danger. But that fear wasn't limited to predators. People also learned to fear angry, hostile, or rejecting members of their own group. Human anger is often written all over the face. Every day we see countless facial expressions. Strangers walking past us, co-workers, friends, family. Most people naturally remember smiles and friendly faces. People with social anxiety often remember the frowns. A normal person walks through a crowded street and forgets almost everyone. Someone with social anxiety walks down that same street and comes home convinced they were judged, criticized, or disliked by dozens of strangers. Most of those judgments never actually happened. Their brain simply interpreted neutral expressions as negative ones. Why would evolution leave us with a trait like this? Because in the ancient world, it kept people alive. Imagine seeing an angry predator or an angry rival from another tribe. The people who recognized the warning signs and backed away survived. The ones who ignored them and stood there staring usually didn't. Natural selection rewarded people who noticed threats early and avoided conflict. Generation after generation, those survival instincts were passed on. That's why humans naturally pay attention to signs of anger, dominance, and social status. The problem begins when that system becomes too sensitive. Then it stops protecting us and starts controlling us. There's another psychological idea that's closely connected to social anxiety. It's called learned helplessness. Back when I lived in a college dorm, whenever I wasted an entire day doing absolutely nothing, I'd jokingly yell at my roommates, "I've got learned helplessness." It was my favorite excuse for procrastinating. But what does learned helplessness actually mean? Let's bring back the same dog from the classic psychology experiment. The dog is locked inside a cage. Someone sounds a buzzer. Then the dog receives an electric shock, panics, jumps around. It desperately tries to escape. This happens over and over again. Eventually, the cage door is opened. The buzzer sounds once more. This time, before any shock even comes, the dog collapses. It trembles. It whimpers. It rolls around in fear. It never even notices that it can simply walk out through the open door. It has learned that escape is impossible. Even when escape becomes possible. That's learned helplessness. I could have spent my time studying. Instead, I watched the hours disappear and let boredom take over. That's my own little version of learned helplessness. Now apply that idea to social anxiety. Someone has one or two painful social experiences. Maybe they're embarrassed in public. Maybe they're rejected. Maybe they're laughed at. After replaying those memories over and over, the brain begins expecting the same pain every single time. Eventually, learned helplessness takes over. Here's a real example. A young girl once stumbled while answering a question in class. Maybe she stuttered. Maybe she froze for a moment. Her classmates laughed. That single moment became burned into her memory. After that, every time she had to speak in class, the same thing happened again. And each experience made the fear even stronger. Eventually, she couldn't answer questions at all. No matter how hard she tried, no words came out. Outside school, she couldn't even buy something at a store because speaking to the cashier felt impossible. Yet when she talked with family and close friends, she had no trouble at all. That is social anxiety disorder strengthened by learned helplessness. Chapter 3. What causes social anxiety? Researchers still don't know exactly how much genetics contribute to social anxiety disorder. There hasn't been enough genetic research to give a clear answer. But one thing has become much clearer. Certain parenting styles can significantly increase the risk of developing social anxiety. The first is being overly protective. Some parents never trust their children to handle problems on their own. They constantly step in, make every decision, and provide very little emotional support when their child struggles. The second is placing too much importance on appearances. Some parents obsess over whether their child looks perfect, dresses properly, or behaves the right way in front of other people. Children raised in that environment often become afraid of making even the smallest mistake because they feel they're always being judged. The third is limiting social experiences. Some parents discourage their children from making friends, joining activities, or interacting with new people. As a result, those children never develop the social skills and confidence needed to handle uncomfortable situations. Instead of becoming more comfortable around people, they become even more afraid of them. So how is social anxiety treated? One of the most effective approaches is group cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. People with the same fears meet together in a safe environment. They talk about situations that trigger their anxiety. Then they recreate those situations through role-playing. For example, if someone is terrified of speaking in front of an audience, the rest of the group pretends to be the audience. The person practices giving the speech again and again until the fear slowly loses its power. Group therapy isn't just about practice. It's also about being understood. Everyone takes turns sharing the pain they've kept hidden for years. The others listen. They comfort each other. They realize they're not alone. That sense of understanding creates emotional support that many of them have never experienced before. I've seen scenes that are impossible to forget. A successful businessman in his 50s leaned against the shoulder of a teenage boy and cried uncontrollably. In that room, none of the usual labels mattered anymore. Not age, not gender, not money, not status. Shared pain erased every barrier. And for the first time in a long time, everyone simply felt human. Chapter 4. Fear without a reason. The strange world of specific phobias. Specific phobias are one of the most common mental health disorders because they're so closely connected to everyday life. Unlike social anxiety disorder, however, specific phobias are more common in women than in men. But the two disorders share one important thing. Without treatment, they often last a lifetime. Imagine this. A young woman is folding laundry at home when she suddenly spots a cockroach. She instantly screams for her boyfriend, collapses into his arms, and cries, "I'm terrified. Get it away from me." The cockroach proudly walks away like it just won the battle. A few days later, she sees the exact same cockroach again. This time, her boyfriend isn't home. Without saying a word, she charges forward and kicks the cockroach across the room. "That's what you get for bothering me again." The cockroach rolls across the floor, completely confused. It pauses for a second and thinks, "Wait, does she have multiple personalities? All right, that's just a joke." But plenty of people really are terrified of cockroaches, especially many women. Some people shiver the moment they even hear the word cockroach. Ask them why they're afraid, and they usually can't explain it. That kind of intense, irrational fear of a specific object or situation is called a specific phobia. Some of the most common examples include fear of heights, fear of enclosed spaces like elevators or subway trains, fear of medical procedures such as blood, injections, or dental work, and animal phobias, especially involving dogs, snakes, mice, or insects. But the list doesn't stop there. People can fear darkness, nighttime, wind or moving air, crossing the street, sharp objects like knives, dust, cuts and scratches, and physical intimacy, other people in general, human society itself, the idea of infinity, being touched, ruins, or simply being alone. The list goes on and on. Do any of those sound familiar? If they do, don't panic. Being afraid of something doesn't automatically mean you have a clinical phobia. Almost everyone has fears. It only becomes a true specific phobia when that fear seriously interferes with your daily life and limits what you can do. Even though phobias can greatly affect someone's quality of life, only a small number of people actually seek treatment. Why? Because most people simply avoid whatever scares them. Someone afraid of heights avoids tall buildings. Someone terrified of flying drives instead. There's even a rare phobia involving the northern lights. Fortunately, it's pretty easy to avoid. Just don't travel somewhere they're visible. Because these fears are so common, specific phobias rank among the most widespread mental health disorders, right alongside social anxiety disorder. Again, women are diagnosed more often than men. And without treatment, these fears often remain for life. Earlier, we talked about Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis. Now it's time to meet another giant in psychology, John B. Watson, the founder of behaviorism. Watson was known as a handsome and charismatic man. That may help explain why one of the biggest scandals of his life became front-page news across America. While working on a research project, Watson began a romantic relationship with his graduate assistant, Rosalie. The affair quickly crossed professional boundaries. There was just one problem. Both Watson's wife and Rosalie came from influential political families. Neither side was willing to stay quiet. Watson's university gave him an ultimatum: save your marriage or lose your career. His answer was simple. He chose love over his academic career. After divorcing his wife, he married Rosalie and walked away from psychology forever. He entered the advertising industry instead. Within just 2 years, he had become a vice president at a major American advertising agency, earning far more money than he ever had as a professor. So why are we talking about Watson? Because his ideas completely changed how psychologists explain the origins of fear. Chapter 5. How Fear is Learned. Hello, everyone. I'm John B. Watson. No, I never surpassed Freud. And yes, my work was heavily inspired by Ivan Pavlov and other researchers. But I'll tell you one thing, I've never been easy to impress. So let me show you my most famous experiment. In 1920, Watson and his assistant conducted a study to understand how fear could be learned. Their subject was an 11-month-old baby who became known as Little Albert. Before the experiment began, Albert was exposed to many different objects: a white rat, a rabbit, other furry animals. He wasn't afraid of any of them, but there was one thing that did scare him. Whenever Watson struck a steel bar with a hammer, it produced an extremely loud noise. Albert immediately cried and showed obvious fear. That was the starting point. Later, whenever Albert reached out to play with the white rat, Watson secretly created the same loud noise behind him. Rat, bang, again and again. Eventually, something remarkable happened. Albert no longer needed to hear the loud noise. Simply seeing the white rat was enough to make him cry. If this sounds familiar, that's because it follows the exact same principle as Pavlov's famous classical conditioning experiment. At first, baby plus white rat equals no fear. Baby plus loud noise equals fear. Baby plus white rat plus loud noise equals fear. Repeat the pairing enough times, Then remove the loud noise. The result becomes baby plus white rat equals fear. But the story didn't stop there. Albert's fear began to spread. Psychologists call this generalization. In everyday language, it's like the saying, once bitten, twice shy. Soon, Albert became frightened by anything furry. A fur coat, a rabbit, other soft, furry objects. Watson concluded that the fear had expanded beyond the white rat itself. Not everyone agreed. Some critics argued that Albert only reacted to a few furry objects. They believed Watson had gone too far by claiming the fear applied to nearly everything with fur. Watson wasn't particularly interested in defending himself. His attitude was simple. No pioneer gets everything right. That's what future researchers are for. Many psychologists later tried to repeat or disprove his findings. Most failed to completely overturn his conclusions. Watson remained convinced that learned associations play a powerful role in creating fear. That brings me to a famous horror story. Japanese horror manga artist Junji Ito wrote a classic called Uzumaki, or Spiral. The story follows a family living in a town obsessed with spirals. The father slowly develops an unhealthy fascination with spiral shapes. At first, it seems harmless. Soon, every object in the house has to be spiral-shaped. He spends entire days staring at whirlpools in rivers. Eventually, his body begins to change. His eyes seem to twist in opposite directions. Finally, he curls his own body into the shape of a spiral inside a large wooden tub and dies. His wife discovers the body with their son. The shock completely breaks her. After that day, she becomes terrified of anything shaped like a spiral. Not just obvious things. Even the swirl in a bowl of soup, a snail's shell, anything that resembles a spiral fills her with panic. Her fear grows so extreme that she cuts away the skin on her fingertips with scissors because fingerprints contain spiral patterns. Her son finally takes her to a hospital. But even there, spirals are everywhere. The swirling liquid inside an 4-bottle. A nurse's tightly wound hair bun. Each one triggers another breakdown. Then, just before she's discharged, she notices a medical diagram on the doctor's wall. The inner ear, the cochlea, is shaped like a spiral. Days later, unable to escape her terror any longer, she takes a pair of long scissors and drives them into her own ear. It's horrifying, but the character reflects something very real. Specific phobias can become so overwhelming that ordinary objects begin to feel dangerous. Watson's experiment had one enormous impact on psychology. It demonstrated that fear doesn't always appear naturally. Sometimes it is learned. Of course, little Albert himself paid a heavy price. The experiment remains one of the most controversial studies in psychology. Many people later questioned whether research like this should ever have been conducted on a child. Even today, it continues to spark ethical debates. Watson's work also teaches us something important about the causes of specific phobias. For many years, psychologists believed almost every phobia began with a traumatic event. If you were bitten by a dog, you became afraid of dogs. Simple. But modern research paints a more complicated picture. Trauma can absolutely create a phobia. It just isn't the only reason. Chapter 6. How specific phobias develop and how they can be treated. There are two other major ways people develop specific phobias. The first is called vicarious learning. Imagine a young boy with a terrible toothache. He's sitting outside the dentist's office, waiting for his turn. Then he hears the high-pitched whine of the dental drill. A second later, someone inside lets out a scream that sounds absolutely unbearable. To the little boy, it doesn't sound like a dental clinic anymore. It sounds like pure torture. Terrified, he runs out of the building on shaking legs. From that day on, he's afraid of dentists. Nothing bad ever happened to him personally. He became afraid simply by watching, or in this case, hearing someone else's fear. That's vicarious learning. Seeing someone get hurt or watching someone panic can make observers feel afraid too. Emotions are contagious. When people around you are laughing, you tend to smile. When everyone around you is terrified, your brain starts preparing for danger as well. The second cause is called instructed learning. Sometimes fear develops simply because people are repeatedly warned about something. Take one woman with an extreme fear of snakes. She had never actually encountered a real snake in her entire life. But while growing up, she constantly heard the same warning. Watch out for snakes. They're dangerous. Always protect yourself. People even told her to wear tall boots in case she walked through tall grass. Eventually, the warning became stronger than reality. She ended up wearing those boots everywhere, even while walking down ordinary city streets. Her fear wasn't learned through experience. It was learned through information. So what does all of this tell us? Classical conditioning can certainly create fear, but classical conditioning usually requires repeated experiences. So what happens if someone experiences only one frightening event? Where do all the repeated lessons come from? The answer is surprisingly simple. The frightening event itself usually isn't enough. What keeps reinforcing the fear is worry. If I have to go back to the dentist? What if I see another snake? Those anxious thoughts replay over and over again. Each replay acts like another learning experience. Eventually, the brain builds a powerful fear response even without another traumatic event. Humans naturally avoid things that seem dangerous. That's how we've survived for thousands of years. The problem is that avoidance also prevents us from learning that many of those situations are actually safe. And that's how a specific phobia is born. Different psychological theories offer other explanations, but we won't go into those here. Instead, let's look at one of the most effective treatments. Its name sounds complicated: systematic desensitization. In plain English, it simply means teaching someone to stop reacting with fear. The treatment has 3 steps. Step 1. Learn to relax. The therapist teaches the patient how to completely relax both body and mind. They sit comfortably in a chair or on a couch. Their arms rest naturally at their sides. They imagine peaceful places, sitting beside a quiet lake, walking through a beautiful meadow, anywhere that feels calm and safe. Meanwhile, the therapist slowly guides them through progressive muscle relaxation. Forearms, face, neck, shoulders, back, chest, abdomen, legs. Special attention is given to relaxing the facial muscles because tension often begins there. Patients usually practice for 20 to 30 minutes every day. Most people master the technique after 6 to 8 sessions. They're also encouraged to practice at home until relaxation becomes second nature. Step 2. Build a fear hierarchy. This step is extremely important. Patients create a list of situations related to their fear. They rank them from least frightening to most frightening. Each situation receives a score. 0 means no anxiety at all. 100 means overwhelming fear. The list should rise gradually, like evenly spaced steps on a staircase. Patients usually close their eyes and vividly imagine each situation while building the list. If the real object is available, imagination isn't even necessary. Step 3. Systematic desensitization begins. Treatment starts with the least frightening situation. The patient imagines it or encounters it if possible. If anxiety appears, they stop and immediately practice relaxation. Afterward, the therapist asks how they felt. If the fear is still strong, they repeat the same step again and again. There's no limit to the number of repetitions. Only when that level no longer creates anxiety do they move to the next one. Then the next, and the next. Think of it as climbing a staircase. Each step conquered makes the next one easier. If someone can't climb higher yet, that's okay. They simply stay on the current step until it no longer feels frightening. Eventually, they reach the top. That's recovery. Now let's have some fun with an imaginary case. Do you like seaweed? It's healthy, rich in iodine, packed with nutrients. Now imagine a college student who absolutely loves eating it. Let's call him Sean. One night, Sean and several roommates secretly cook seaweed in an electric hot pot inside their dorm room. Right in the middle of cooking, the entire dorm building loses power. Was it because they overloaded the electrical circuit? Nobody knows, but guilty people always assume the worst. Students rush into the hallway asking what happened. Sean panics. If they catch us using this hot pot, we're dead. He throws open the window to clear the smell. Everyone hurriedly hides the evidence. Finally, Sean turns back to enjoy at least one bite of the meal. The pot is empty. Every last piece is gone. His roommates are happily licking their lips. One of them grins. Mission accomplished, boss. We destroyed all the evidence. Even the soup is gone. Sean sighs. At least they weren't caught. A few weeks later, Sean organizes another late-night seaweed feast. And unbelievably, the power goes out again. This time, dorm staff immediately begins searching every room for illegal appliances. Sean's roommates once again eliminate every bit of evidence before inspectors arrive. Not a single drop is left. Sean doesn't get a bite. After 2 disasters, something strange happens. Sean develops an irrational fear of seaweed. Hearing the word makes him shake. Seeing seaweed makes him panic. Smelling it makes him want to run. Eating it feels impossible. He's convinced seaweed itself is cursed. Eventually, the fear becomes so overwhelming that he stops attending classes and locks himself inside his dorm room. Only when he's at risk of leaving college does he finally seek professional help. So let's treat Sean using systematic desensitization. Step 1. Teach him to relax. Step 2. Sean builds his fear hierarchy. 100 points, eating seaweed. 80 points, smelling seaweed. 60 points, seeing seaweed. 40 points, hearing someone mention seaweed. 20 points, simply thinking about seaweed. Step 3. Treatment begins at the bottom. Just thinking about seaweed. First, Sean becomes anxious. He sweats. His body trembles. His heart races. When the anxiety peaks, he stops imagining it and practices relaxation. Once he calms down completely, he tries again. He repeats the process until merely thinking about seaweed no longer bothers him. Then he moves up to hearing the word, then seeing it, then smelling it, then finally eating it. There will be setbacks. There will be days when progress feels impossible. That's perfectly normal. Psychologists often say that when someone feels they're at their absolute lowest, that may be exactly when real recovery is about to begin.